Chapter 49. The moment I consumed Clayman, silence fell over the chamber. Then, Guy Crimson stood. The red-haired demon lord looked down at me, his expression unreadable, but his tone was solemn. An impressive feat, he declared. I hereby recognize your right, from this day forward, to call yourself a demon lord. His crimson eyes swept the room. Does anyone disagree? No one moved. No one spoke. I had passed the exam. That was a relief. Because, to be honest, if even one of them had objected, I would have had no choice but to fight. And goading all the demon lords into combat? Yeah, that would have been suicide. Guess I never really had much to worry about after all. I dispelled the barrier. The moment it vanished, Ramirez came flying straight at my face, like a high-speed fairy missile. Ha ha, I knew you'd deliver when it counted, Rimuru. She cheered, hovering inches from me. In fact, I'd be happy to hire you as my apprentice. I'm good, thanks, I replied, deadpan. Find someone else. Why? She whined. What's the big deal? Why won't you just say yes like a good kid? HMPH. Milam puffed out her chest. Rimuru's my bestie. I heard she doesn't even want to hang out with you. What? No way. Ramirez spun back to me in horror. Hey, that's a lie, right, Rimuru? Wahahahaha. Milam smirked. Sorry, Ramirez, you're not part of our team. What? Hiya. Right on cue, Ramirez launched a flying kick at Milam's face. Milam casually leaned to the side, dodging it with a giggle. Their bickering echoed through the chamber, like two kids in a schoolyard. These two, they're better friends than I thought. Meanwhile, I noticed Veldora engrossed in friendly-looking conversation with the demon lord Dagrul, bragging about how he was training to keep his aura hidden. Dino, meanwhile, let out a long yawn, already bored now that the action had ended. Well, he groaned, stretching his arms over his head, it's fine by me. Weirdo. And impossible to read. I was never really sure what went on inside that guy's head. As for Leon, he didn't even bother pretending to care. Hey, I don't care who becomes a demon lord. Do whatever you want. Talk about cold. Then again, that was just Leon being Leon. Frey and Caroline gave me nods of quiet approval, no objections from them either. Which left just one, Valentine. He had remained silent until now. But at last, he rose from his seat, movements slow, deliberate. Personally, he murmured, I would never want to allow a low-born slime to become a demon lord. But, dressed as gaudily as some over-the-top emperor, Valentine sneered down at me. Yeah, no surprise there, he was clearly a no. Not that it mattered, I already had majority approval. I was about to move on when. Quahahaha, are you insulting my sister, you lackey? Veldora suddenly roared, turning his fiery gaze not on Valentine, but on the maid standing beside him. Come on, Milus, you really ought to train your servants better. Want me to give this one a little education? What the hell? Wait, did he seriously just forget her name already? What are you talking about? The maid replied, voice cold as steel, eyes narrowed. I am merely a loyal attendant of Sir Valentine. Hey, don't do that. Milam chimed in, waving her hands. Valentine's totally hiding the truth, Veldora. You can't just go saying that. Milam, are you kidding me? You just blew the whole thing open. We'd had our suspicions, sure, but she just confirmed them without even blinking. As expected, this fetching young woman standing so prim and proper, was the real demon lord. And judging by the sheer death she was radiating at Milam with her glare, she was not happy about being outed. Milam finally realized what she'd just done. She immediately began whistling, loudly and very off-key, as if that might somehow make everyone forget what she said. Then, of course, she slipped behind me like a child hiding behind her parent. Luminous didn't strike me as someone who took jokes lightly. And right now, she didn't look amused. Her gaze swept the chamber, calm, but unmistakably murderous. The kind of look that said she planned to kill us all and hide the evidence. She looked hostile and dangerous, but luckily, she decided not to take on the entire rest of the room. She looked hostile, dangerous, and thoroughly annoyed, but thankfully, she didn't immediately go nuclear on the whole room. TCH, such a bothersome, villainous dragon, she muttered, her voice as sharp as a dagger drawn in silence. How long will he insist upon meddling with me? And you've forgotten my very name, no less. How can anyone have such a gift for aggravating me? She cast a glare toward Veldora, whose usual smugness was starting to fade into awkward shifting. That did not help the mood. The atmosphere in the chamber changed completely. The laughter was gone, the tension thick as magical fog. This was the Demon Lord Luminous, speaking. And everyone felt it. Veldora, being dunderheaded enough to misremember her name, was apparently the final straw. Enough of this, she huffed, folding her arms with regal irritation. You may call me Valentine. So yeah, the real Valentine stood before us now. Then, without warning, a massive surge of magical force burst outward from her. It wasn't hostile, but it was overwhelming. Refined, commanding, divine. In a flash, the maid outfit vanished, replaced by an ornate, Gothic-style dress. Change dress in action. Yeah, this was the real thing. The stand-in Valentine, Roy, apparently, had been powerful in his own right. But compared to her, he was nothing but a puppet. What now stood before us was the true luminous Valentine, a demon lord among demon lords. The very embodiment of strength and beauty, clad in silken shadows and divine arrogance. You may leave ahead of me, Roy, she said, voice cool and imperious, addressing the former, Valentine like a discarded coat. But Lady Valentine, Roy's voice was hesitant, but Luminous raised a hand to silence him. If I've been unmasked in front of this many people, she said coolly, there's no point keeping up the charade. Her eyes flicked, no, bored a hole, into Veldora again. The dragon flinched. It's not my fault. I didn't know, he stammered, clearly shaken and doing his best not to meet her gaze. Meanwhile, Milam had already moved on in her head. Probably thinking about food or something. Typical, selfish as ever, she was already treating the whole incident like someone else's problem. I couldn't even be mad, it was just so, Milam. Luminous, despite the obvious irritation still lingering around her like a winter chill, seemed ready to drop the subject. No one wanted to drag it out, not even her. Shaking off the anger with practiced grace, she turned to Roy, who had quietly reassumed his role as servant, standing respectfully before her. Anyway, she said, her voice colder now, measured, deliberate, and far more serious, there is something that concerns me. She paused. When Clayman looked at you, she continued, his eyes stopped for a moment, did they not? Just for an instant. That hesitation troubles me. Roy stiffened, clearly recalling the moment. He might be involved with those cockroaches who invaded my domain earlier. I want you to return home and instruct our forces to raise their security. Tighten the net. No one enters or leaves unchecked. Cockroaches. Guess Caroline and I weren't the only ones Clayman decided to antagonize. The idiot made enemies everywhere. Maybe, just maybe, he used Walpurgis as a smokescreen, a convenient way to summon Valentine away from her territory, so someone else could gather intelligence from her domain while she was here. It made sense. That guy was rotten through and through, and apparently smarter than he looked, at least when someone else was pulling the strings. No wonder everyone hated him. Yes, my lady. Roy gave a deep bow and exited the chamber alone, never questioning Luminous's command. There was no protest, no final word, just silence and obedience. He knew his place. That throne was never his. Just a stand-in, a political puppet, and honestly, it said a lot about Luminous's real authority that nobody had even realized until now. Either way, time to switch gears. I casually pulled the round table out of my stomach, then set it back in its place with a soft thud. Good thing I thought to store it before smashing it during the fight. If things had gone south before barrier was set up, this whole room would have been reduced to magical rubble. And judging by how extravagant the place was, repairs would not have been cheap. One by one, the demon lords returned to their seats, the tense mood finally starting to settle. Guy's two maids, along with Ren, unsurprisingly, brought out fresh tea and began quietly serving us. Wait a second, whose maid are you exactly? I glanced at Ren, who served me with a perfectly neutral expression, as if she hadn't just threatened Demon Lord and True Dragon not even half an hour ago. Before I could say anything, Leon suddenly said next to me, I just remembered. I thought I had heard the name Kozalime somewhere before, but that's the Demon Lord I killed, isn't it? I thought I was gonna spit the tea out right then and there. He said that way too casually. Like he was reminiscing about some half-forgotten recipe. Oh yes, that's the Demon Lord I killed. Excuse me. Before I could even react, Ren, standing quietly at my side, leaned in just a little. Soft, polite tone, perfect maid smile. My lady, she said evenly, do take care not to spit out the tea. It would be terribly improper, and if you stain the tablecloth, I'll be forced to punish you. Ellipsis. I froze, teacup halfway to my lips. What? What kind of threat was that supposed to be? Ren, I swear, sometimes I don't know whether to feel protected or terrified. Meanwhile, Leon calmly sipped his tea, oblivious, or more likely, completely indifferent, to the chaos he'd caused in my brain. So how is this Kozalime related to Clayman? I asked, turning toward the group. Kozalime is the Curse Lord, Caroline replied, arms crossed. You and he recommended me for this post, didn't you, Milam? Oh, him, the Curse Lord, I remember. Milam's eyes lit up as she clapped her hands. Huh, so that's the demon Lord Leon killed. She said it like she was talking about some old neighbor who moved away. So she knew him by his nickname, huh? That made a little sense, I guess. He probably made more of an impression with that title than his actual name. Still, it was Milam, so, honestly, she probably forgot because she found the whole thing too boring to care. Must be nice, I thought, being that powerful and that easily distracted. Leon didn't bother reacting, just kept sipping his tea like we were discussing the weather. Right, Kozalime was a walking dead like Clayman, said Caroline, his tone oddly nostalgic. A unique monster, he said, evolved all on his own from an elf. I was kinda friendly with him back in the day, so he told me a few things. The two of them must have been working together behind the scenes. After all, Clayman took over Kozalime's old seat. Unlike with Clayman, Caroline didn't sound bitter. No grudge in his voice, just the kind of resigned respect you gave to someone dangerous. But something about that made me pause. Wait a sec, if Kozalime was undead, I glanced around, lowering my voice a little. So, is Kozalime still alive? I mean, what if he just pretended Leon killed him and went into hiding? Yeah, Caroline replied with a shrug, that might be the case. He was a really sharp guy, you know. Smarter than he let on. You had to be even more careful around him than Clayman. I blinked. Great, just great. I was hoping we'd tied up all the loose ends with Clayman, but now it sounded like we'd only torn the curtain back a little. So I might be right, I thought. Well, Leon naturally objected, I don't much like how you phrased that, as if I let him get away. His golden eyes flicked toward me, sharp but disinterested. He invited me to join his little force, claiming he'd help me ascend to Demon Lord status. Turning him down would have been inconvenient. So I decided to defeat him and seize his position instead. Whether he's alive or dead now, irrelevant to me. Of course, that was Leon's take on it. Still, whoa there, Leon, I said, brow twitching. That's exactly the kind of attitude that made Clayman hate your guts, you know. HMPH. He sipped his tea like I'd just commented on the weather. Do you think I care? Yeah, no, I don't think he did. To Leon, this entire situation was just another minor annoyance in his very busy schedule of being untouchable and condescending. But even so, Clayman tried to manipulate Leon, too. He really was gunning for everyone, wasn't he? At first, I thought he was just some arrogant puppet with too much ambition and not enough brains, but now, I was starting to wonder. Maybe Clayman was more cunning than I gave him credit for. Which just made me even more curious, and more concerned, about whoever was actually pulling his strings. Among Clayman's allies was a group called the Moderate Jesters, I said aloud, glancing around the table. Those jesters hinted they had connections in the human world, so maybe the resurrected Kozalime has taken human form, you know. It wasn't just wild guessing. According to Leon, Kozalime's body vanished after their fight. He didn't leave behind a corpse, just disappeared. That usually meant one thing, spiritual form survival. If that was the case, then, it would make perfect sense for him to quietly possess a new vessel. Someone, or something, else's body. The human world was full of candidates. Politicians, nobles, adventurers, or even royalty. All too easy to slip into, especially if you had backers like the jesters opening doors. I crossed my arms, thinking aloud now. He could already be moving behind the scenes, using someone else's name, face, and influence. The room was quiet for a moment. You might be correct, Guy unexpectedly stated, his crimson eyes narrowing. Leon's attacks can destroy the spirit itself. If anything, I'd mightily praise Kozalime for surviving that. But even for demons like us, a full resurrection from the soul alone takes centuries. I doubt a walking dead could pull that off alone. Not without help. That last word hung heavy in the air. If Kozalime was back, then someone, something, had helped him crawl his way out of oblivion. That thought didn't sit well with me. Well, I muttered, folding my arms, either way, I'll just assume he's alive and stay on guard. If I just took out Clayman, he might be out for revenge. Wah ha 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 ha. Why worry, Rimuru? Milim cut in with her usual cheerful recklessness. You're way stronger than him now. If he shows up, just punch him again. Milim, I deadpanned, that's the exact kind of cockiness that gets people killed. But still, this was no time to let our guard down. Thanks to today's win, Clayman's forces were finished, and the balance among the demon lords was finally shifting. Still, behind Clayman's fall, was a web of deeper schemes, ones that didn't end here. Our enemies wouldn't move just yet. Not with all eyes watching. But they would move, and when they did, I'd be ready. After some more chatting, the council continued. With the one who called it out of the meeting, Guy took over in his place. The main subject of this council was Carillon's betrayal and the rise of Rimuru over there, but those issues have been settled. Carillon has betrayed no one, and Rimuru has demonstrated ample power to join our ranks. Personally, I'd be happy to adjourn this session here, but an opportunity like this doesn't come along every day. Does anyone have something they'd like to say to the other demon lords? A moment passed before Frey and Carillon exchanged a glance. Then Frey stood, poised and elegant as always. I do. From this day forward, both Carillon and I will step down as demon lords. Instead, we pledge ourselves to serve under Lady Milim Nava as her trusted advisors and subordinates. PFF'd. The moment those words reached her ears, Milim launched a full spray of tea across the table. A beat of silence followed. Without a word, Ren, who had just finished pouring a round of tea for the guests, smoothly stepped in with perfect composure. She took out a napkin, dabbed the table clean, and then gently pressed another to Milim's face. Still silent, still smiling, terrifyingly, Milim froze like a deer in headlights. Hold on. I didn't mean to spit that out. You're both joking, right? Right, Frey, Carillon, but neither of them budged. Frey simply gave her a knowing smile. Carillon crossed his arms and nodded firmly. We've made our decision, he said. Milim opened her mouth to protest again, then groaned, puffed out her cheeks, and slumped forward on the table. Fine, she muttered, but only 'cause you're both my friends. A soft smack of approval came as Ren gently patted her on the head once before returning to her place behind me. The table, once again, immaculate. Guy scoffed, his voice tinged with mild disappointment. I actually liked you, you know. In another 100 years, I was expecting you to awaken properly. Then he grinned, sharp and amused. But very well, from this moment on, Frey and Carillon are no longer demon lords. You're free to serve Milim in whatever manner you please. With those words, the abdication was official. No one raised a complaint. Not a whisper of objection echoed through the chamber, not even from the more prideful among us. Myself included, of course. So, that made it official. I was now recognized as a proper demon lord. One of the old members had dropped out thanks to a rather brutal consumption, and 2 had voluntarily stepped down to serve under Milim. The once 10 great demon lords had now become 8. I thought that would mark the end of the council. But of course, there was one last problem. So we're not the 10 great demon lords anymore. I murmured, mostly to myself. That offhand comment, unfortunately, was anything but offhand to this crowd. That is a concern, Dagrel rumbled in his deep voice. For the sake of our dignity, we must consider a new name. Wait, seriously, that's your concern now? I blinked. Fortunately, Walpurgis is still in session, said Valentine, perfectly composed and entirely unamused as usual. With all of us present, this is an opportune moment to resolve the issue. Even she was on board. And she couldn't even laugh at a knock-knock joke. Come on, I said, does this really matter that much? The humans are probably gonna come up with some nickname for us anyway. Ooh, yes, Ramirez chimed in, flapping up into the air with a theatrical huff. It was a total pain the last time. Our numbers kept changing and we had to hold so many boring councils just to rename ourselves. Like, seriously, I looked around. Everyone was nodding in grim agreement, as if this was the most solemn issue of the entire day. Unbelievable, out of everything we'd discussed, this was the part they treated the most seriously. I sighed. All right, people, calm down, Guy declared, clapping his hands like a teacher herding a class of hyperactive students. We need to show some cooperation for a change. We can overcome this. Coming from the guy who practically thrives on chaos, that was rich. But judging by his tone, I got the sense he'd been through this naming nightmare before. But, should we, the 8 great, Ramirez timidly offered. And just like that, silence. Not a respectful kind either, it was the kind of dead air that made you wish you could turn invisible. Right, she stammered quickly, pulling her legs up and hugging her knees in the air. Guy's got a good point. Let's work on this together. A nice save, barely, but yeah, enthusiasm for the 8 great demon lords was not trending. Everyone seemed to agree that it sucked. Problem was, agreeing on anything else was still way out of reach. Wahahahahaha. Milam cackled, waving her hand. I'll let you guys take care of that stuff. I'm tired, Dino yawned, already stretching. I'm gonna go to sleep. Seriously, this is what counts as working together. I sighed internally, watching the so-called Lords of Chaos and Destruction dissolve into a bunch of kids at a group project with no leader. But one among us managed to cut through the thick, awkward atmosphere, someone who, unsurprisingly, had absolutely no idea how tense things were. Oh, if that's the problem, then my Rimuru's a real professional. It was Veldora, of course. Bored out of his mind and probably itching to go home already. And now, thanks to his shout, everyone was looking at me. I really wish he had a fresh stack of manga to distract him. Wait, did he finish the last volume already? You know, Ramirez suddenly said, perking up with a thoughtful nod. When she named Beretta, she came up with that name in no time flat, too. Great, they were delegating everything to me. I glanced around the table, and yep. Expectant expressions everywhere. Crap, when did I get fully surrounded? Was this a trap? The demon lords exchanged silent glances, clearly arriving at an unspoken consensus. Then, with theatrical flair, Guy rose from his seat. Rimuru, he declared, voice booming like he was presenting me with a royal decree, today you stand as a new demon lord. I wish to grant you a wonderful new privilege. No, I'm good, thanks. I raised both hands politely, already backing away in my chair. I tried to cut him off before he could finish, but nope. He wasn't going to let that happen. With a heavy wham, the shiny, obsidian-like, probably irreplaceable table was split right in half. That was a war crime, surely. Yes, Guy said smoothly, walking up to me with the poise of a predatory cat. His hand brushed past my cheek, way too close, thank you, and his voice dropped just enough to send shivers down my spine. I will grant you the right to provide us with a new name. A very honorable position, I should say. You will accept it, yes. That was not a suggestion. It was 100% a threat, cloaked in faux elegance and disturbing charisma. He was totally wheedling me. Maybe it even looked like kindness, but no, not with that tone. His voice made it very clear. Say no, and you'll regret it. And you know, Guy whispered, half biting at my ear. My ear. His fingernails dragged along my cheek, sharp enough to make me twitch. This all happened because you culled our numbers, did it not? You'll be kind enough to take responsibility and come up with a name, yes. To an impartial observer, we might have looked like lovers sharing a very intense moment. We weren't. This was a threat, a terrifying, elegant, borderline sadistic threat. And I had no rebuttal for it. Was naming stuff really that important to them? Fine, all right, sheesh, I snapped. You don't have to whine just because you didn't like the old name. I resigned myself to my fate. The second I did, I could feel the whole table deflate in relief. Some were already sipping tea like this was over. One even leaned back with a content sigh. Traitors, the lot of them. Behind me, Ren stepped forward in eerie silence. She pulled out a napkin with mechanical grace and began forcefully scrubbing my face, especially my ear. Ow, Ren, you don't have to scrub so hard. My lady, she said with a terrifying smile, you allowed that man to bite you. I'm disinfecting the area, he didn't actually bite me. She said nothing, and kept scrubbing. Come to think of it, it's a new moon tonight, isn't it? A clear night sky, scattered with twinkling stars. Hey, how about the octagram? You know, like an 8-pointed star. Silence. All the demon lords closed their eyes as if carefully weighing the word in some ancient, dramatic ceremony. Then, in eerie unison, they all opened them again. Settled, then. Quite lovely. See, I told ya, I just knew Rimuru would pull it off for us. Ramirez declared with a punch in the air, way too proud of herself. Impressive. I can see Veldora's recommendation was an apt one, Dagrel said with a slow, respectful nod. HMPH. Well, so be it. Perhaps you are slightly talented, Valentine sniffed. Dang, just like that, Dino blinked. Wow, like, what was with all the trouble we had last time, anyway? Leon grunted, arms crossed, like he had already moved on. No negative feedback, not a single complaint. Honestly, I was kind of relieved. I had a whole backup plan to throw the job at someone else if they said even one bad word. Also, I really don't know why Milam's standing there with her hands on her hips like she engineered all this. I had a lot of questions. But, as a mature adult/demon lord, I had the composure to simply pretend my problems didn't exist. And so, from this point forward, we would be feared and revered under a brand new name. We were called the Octagram, Lord of Darkness, Guy Crimson Demon, Destroyer, Milam Nava Dragonoid, Labyrinth Master, Ramirez Pixie, Earthquake, Dagrul Giant, Queen of Nightmares, Valentine Vampire, Sleeping Ruler, Dino Fallen, Platinum Saber, Leon Cromwell Demonoid, and me, newbie, Rimuru Tempest Slime. We numbered 8 in all, and with those 8, we had just opened the curtain on a new era of demon lords. The first order of business was how we divide up the territories. As expected, I was officially granted dominion over the entirety of the Great Forest of Jura, a hell of a bargain considering how much land it covered. But if you asked me who really made out like a bandit, the answer was obvious. Milam. She ended up with the unified domains of Frey, Carillon, and the late Clayman, all falling under her jurisdiction. Well, rule, technically. In name only, Carillon and Frey would be taking care of the actual administration, with the Dragon Faithful directly serving Milam to oversee the rest. Milam herself was, let's say, not exactly the paperwork type. So yeah, she got the title, her subordinates got the real workload. As for the other demon lords, no change in territory for them. That wasn't surprising, some of them didn't even have a defined domain in the first place. A few wandered freely with no home base. Others kept their headquarters veiled in mystery, while the rest had isolated fortresses on distant, often forgotten continents. These demon lords didn't tend to sweat the small stuff, especially things like official borders or formal governance, but they did have their own systems for staying in touch. That was where the rings came in. Each demon lord was granted one, a symbol of their status. But more than just flashy accessories, these rings served a very practical purpose. They acted like a kind of interdimensional communication device. You could use them for private calls between two lords, or even link up multiple people at once for a group discussion. Secret chats or conference summons, it had all the options. Honestly, it was a pretty convenient piece of magic tech. I kind of wanted to reverse engineer it once I got home. Though considering the kind of people using them, I had to wonder what kind of nonsense those party lines usually turned into. Still, I couldn't deny the rings were useful, especially if we ever needed to call another Walpurgis without going through all this dramatic build-up again. Clayman's schemes, and the chaos he spread around the forest, were a thing of the past. I had been accepted as a new demon lord. Kozalime, Clayman's apparent master, was a worry to me, but the demon lord drama I dealt with was now all taken care of. Now, I was a full-fledged vertex on the Octagram. Once we settled on the name Octagram for ourselves, Misery and Rain, the green and blue-haired maids in Guy Crimson's service, prepared an extravagant meal for us all. They were decked out in dark red maids' outfits, and their kitchen skills, it turned out, were second to none. I hadn't expected Demon Lord level cuisine, but wow, they could open a 5-star restaurant and never run out of customers. And then I noticed someone else had joined them. Ren, in her classic black and white maid outfit, was assisting them at the serving table, expression as calm and dignified as ever. She blended in so well with Misery and Rain that it was almost uncanny. The 3 maids, each refined in their own way, were working like they'd been trained together for years. I watched Ren for a moment, her posture, her timing, the precise way she set a tray down or adjusted a tea set, and yep. She was absolutely in her element. The perfect maid atmosphere was practically radiating off her. I think she might have found some kindred spirits. She didn't say a word, but I could feel her quiet contentment from here. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she started exchanging tea ceremony tips with them after this. The feast ended with a generous helping of fresh, colorful fruit. There were only 6 of us still seated at the table now, me, Guy, Milam, Ramirez, Dino, and Dagrul. Valentine and Leon had long since taken their leave, probably off brooding in their own fashionable ways. As I sipped the last of my tea, I turned to Milam, who was whistling innocently as she stabbed a melon slice with her fork. "Hey, Milam," I began, voice low but firm. She froze. "I need to talk to you about earlier." You really need to stop being so careless and causing problems for everyone. You may be powerful, but that doesn't mean you can just go around dropping names and exposing secrets, especially ones that could have turned into very dangerous situations. Huh, what do you mean, causing problems? I was just being honest. She protested, puffing her cheeks. You told everyone Valentine was the real demon lord in front of the whole chamber. Oh, that. Milam scratched her cheek, pretending to look confused. Oops, I sighed, rubbing my temples. That's not an oops. That's the kind of thing that starts wars, you know. But I thought we were all friends now. Milam, eep. She immediately tried hiding behind Dino, who simply yawned and leaned further back in his chair to avoid getting involved. Real helpful. Despite her usual antics, I figured she'd understand, eventually. Even if I had to beat it into her head with lectures instead of fists. Meanwhile, I had Caroline and Frey promise to meet with me again later. We needed to start laying the groundwork for what came next. With Clayman gone, and the Demon Lord structure shifting, this was a rare chance to build something new, something stable. The three of us would be involved in rebuilding a nation, technically with Milam at the top, but let's be honest, we all knew who was going to handle the actual work. If I was going to be dragged into this city-building business, I might as well make sure it played to my advantage, too. And knowing Frey and Caroline, they'd be pragmatic enough to see the benefits. So things were in full swing before long at this feast, and I decided to quietly take my leave. The mood was light, everyone finally relaxed, and even Milam seemed too full to cause any more mischief for once. It had been a long night. Honestly, I was surprised my clothes weren't scorched, ripped, or tea-stained after everything. From the explosive start with Clayman, to Veldora nearly starting a war by insulting Luminous, to somehow ending up in charge of naming an entire Demon Lord alliance, it was a miracle things didn't spiral out of control. I slipped out of the Grand Chamber with Ren, Xian. Ramirez followed me intent on staying in Tempest. I was too tired to argue with her, so I ignored her. It was quite the ending to the Walpurgis Council, not at all what I expected. But I'm glad my worrying, paranoia, and contingency plans upon contingency plans were, in the end, not needed. Even if it all went smoother than expected, it didn't change the fact that I was completely drained. Walpurgis began at the stroke of midnight. And now, as I stepped into the quiet hallway beyond the throne room, the faint light filtering through the palace windows told me it was already early afternoon the next day. Almost 24 hours straight. One full day as a demon lord, and what a start. To be continued.